Without further ado, let's chat about the 10 things you can do right now to maintain focus and momentum in higher ed during uncertain times. And we are in certain uncertain times indeed, between threats to federal funding, the pending enrollment cliff, the search cliff, declining trust in higher ed, doubts about its return on investment, and also a declining international student population, and just many other challenges. I would say many of us are anxious as higher ed professionals. We chose higher ed as a profession because we deeply believe in the mission of the institutions that we work at, and we've seen their impact for good over and over and over again firsthand. And as was the case during the 2008 recession and during COVID, now is not the time to turn away from our chosen vocation. It's time to double down. And today is really meant to encourage you and embolden you to do just that. And as Dana said, as we go along, please drop your questions into the Q&A function here on Zoom. We'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Apologies, I just messed up with my slides. Here we go. All right, before we dive in, a quick round of introductions. So I'm Suzanne Brinker. If you don't know me, I'm a co-founder and the CEO here at Viv. I started the firm after having served as director of marketing at Penn State World Campus at Northeastern. I left the in-house world to essentially build the agency partner that I always wished I had. We're now 5.5 years in. We have a team of 18 amazing people. We work with institutions across New England, the US, and internationally. And with me here today is Dana Cruikshank, our Vice President of Client Growth. Dana has been with us since September of last year. He brings a very impressive background from serving as Director of Communications at Virginia Tech, spending 6 years at another higher ed marketing enrollment firm, and working for a higher ed research startup as well. Also with me is Audra Delaney Hall. Audra is our VP of People Operations. She has been in this since basically the very beginning. We stole her away from Williams College, and before that, she was also at Bowling Green State University. And our final and fourth presenter today is Kate Jackson Meyer. Kate is a senior consultant with us here at Viv, focused on mission and culture. She has a really impressive background as a theologian, including a PhD from Boston College, and she currently also serves as a postdoc at the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard. Before we dive into the presentation, I will turn it over to Dana for a quick introduction of Viv as well.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. So we at Viv Higher Education have been working since 2019, really providing comprehensive enrollment marketing, and other services to institutions across the country and around the world. We are proud to work with all of our partners, some of whom are with us today, I see, which is great. Glad to have you here. Part of what has really driven our growth part of what has driven our growth is the results that we've been able to achieve. And a lot of that comes from our values. Each of us is a former campus marketer and leader ourselves. And we're really trying to be the type of agency partner that we kind of wish we had when we were on the other side of the table. That means bringing an entrepreneurial spirit, a sense of radical candor, and a commitment to client service, because we really believe that you deserve nothing less.
Yeah, so what you're going to learn today, you're going to learn why a crisis is a mandate to make good decisions. And you're going to learn that specifically as part of a story about how Radford University managed to turn itself around during a crisis. Then, as you know, you're going to learn 10 concrete and cross-functional things that you can do at your institutions right now to get ahead and maintain momentum. Those 10 concrete things will also contain more examples. And then we're going to wrap it up with how Hampshire College came back from the brink of closure a few years back. And we will also talk about why investing in people is more important than ever right now. But first, Dana is going to take you through a quick case study.
Thanks, Suzanne. So I just want to introduce everyone to a small public regional institution that is really near and dear to my heart, Radford University. And it is also literally near to me. It's only about 15 miles away from where I'm sitting right now. They really offer a great case study of what to do in a time of crisis, and in many ways, kind of multiple crises happening at once. If we rewind the tape back and kind of look at where Radford was between about 2019 and 2024, that was when I first came to work with them, was during a previous job with another company. It was around 2022, and they were truly in crisis. They were in the bottom of the pack when it comes to Virginia's public institutions. And more acutely, between 2019 and 2023, their enrollments had declined an astonishing 37%. That is a crisis indeed. I will never forget being in a room for a strategy session, and their VP of enrollment at the time just started talking about how their current agency had failed them, and that they had been told that the key to growth was just to keep buying more test score names. But as he put it, then, that tactic was really played out for them. There just wasn't enough names or leads out there for them to solve their problems. And like a lot of institutions today, they felt a little frozen. Their problems were really severe. They were hitting COVID headwinds at the time, of course, but also just feeling the impact of really years of non-decision making. They were trying to be kind of an all things to all people kind of institution, and it just wasn't working. They were lurching around regional markets, just trying to find applicants. Yet many of their students, kind of their core student audience, was from right here in Appalachia, where the demographic cliff actually arrived early in the past decade. And so too did today's kind of cultural trends that we see around the country among certain communities of being really distrustful of higher education, just a high level of skepticism around it. And make things worse, they are only 15 miles away from Virginia Tech, which is absolutely exploding in size and is stealing market share from them and other institutions in the region as well. So you really can't blame them for kind of feeling frozen by just sort of crisis after crisis. But I do just want to tell you kind of just a funny thing about that word crisis. It actually comes from the ancient Greek word krisis, which just simply means time to make a decision. And we believe here that you should never really let a good crisis go to waste. And Radford certainly did not. Now, I want you to take a look at these headlines just from this past fall in 2024. It is clear that Radford has absolutely turned it around. As the headlines say, massive growth, record retention. Things are really working out well for Radford now. So how'd they do it? How'd they pull that off in such a short period of time? Well, really, they made the hard decisions. They went ahead and rebooted their strategy and their approach to what they were doing. They moved away from tactics that felt kind of tried and true, but weren't coming through for them anymore, including that over-reliance on name buys. And they got very focused on their targeting, really locking in on first-generation rural students and others. And then they rebooted their brand just a bit to appeal to those newly defined segments. They also changed up their messaging to appeal to them and brought on something they called the Radford Promise, which was simply to say, if you make less than $100,000 a year, your tuition won't go up while you're there, knowing that folks were really cost conscious and concerned about value and inflation and so forth. They took a really data-informed approach to lead generation. They tooled up their yield, which had also been a weak spot for them. These are the types of decisions in uncertain times that can really make a difference. And really, that is what we are here to discuss today with you.
Yeah, thanks for this case study, Dana. Some really powerful insights in there alone. But now it is time to talk through the 10 things you can do right now at your institution to stay focused and gain momentum. And of course, we couldn't help ourselves and needed to pay homage to Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles here. Just love that movie. It's old, but still a goodie. All right, number one is do a better SWOT analysis. So one of my pet peeves is that a lot of people treat a SWOT analysis just like a simple list, when instead, when used correctly, a SWOT analysis can really help you unlock strategic pivots during a time of crisis. And the first tip about a SWOT analysis, and many of you will know this, is it's really important to keep the strengths and weaknesses to internal factors and the opportunities and threats to external factors. So instead of saying something like, we should invest in faculty as an opportunity, it's too early for that. When you initially put the SWOT together, you're not ideating, you're listing things that are factors that impact your institution. And like I said, pet peeve of mine. So let's look at an example of a made up small liberal arts college. So this is the SWOT analysis, just a simple SWOT analysis filled in for them. So let's assume they have highly qualified faculty. That's one of their strengths. They have state-of-the-art facilities, they have strong student engagement, and they have diverse extracurriculars. Many of you can imagine this institution, right? Maybe this is your institution. On the weaknesses side, again, sticking with internal factors, they have limited national and international brand recognition. So their market is pretty regional at this time. They have higher tuition compared to public competitors. Very, very likely that that's the case for any liberal arts college that's private. And they probably also have a good amount, speaking of pet peeves, of administrative silos. So those are the key internal factors on the strength and weaknesses side. Then we're going to look at opportunities. And again, these are external factors that are happening in the marketplace that really are not controllable by the institution itself. So the first factor here that they're listing is growing demand for alternative education models, things like badges, credentials, boot camps, what have you, things that have nothing to do with degrees, but that could potentially stack into degrees. We know the market is looking for that. They're listing it as an opportunity. They also know that they have local businesses around them who are in need of liberal arts graduates. The employers around them are telling them, we need people who can manage uncertainty, who can make decisions under pressure, who can be empathetic, all the things that liberal arts colleges bring to the table. And then under threats, again, sticking with external, they have intense competition like we all do, right? There's just a ton of competition now in higher ed. They're looking at the demographic cliff, which is going to hit in 2026, 15% fewer domestic freshmen coming into our institutions. They're looking at regulatory changes that are impacting the private education sector. And they're also seeing rapid advancements in ed tech, potentially threatening them further down the line. All right, so this is the SWOT. It's a list of factors. Most important thing is they kept internal and external separate. Now the real magic begins. Once you've created your SWOT analysis, it's important not to stop. You can now combine internal and external factors to generate ideas for strategic pivots. And it always blows my mind how many institutions are missing this step entirely, including cabinets and boards that I have sat in on, who don't even know that this is what's the next thing that you're supposed to do with a SWOT. So you start combining strengths and opportunities into SO strategies, strengths and weaknesses, strengths and threats into ST strategies, weaknesses and opportunities into WO strategies, and weaknesses and threats into ST strategies. So back at the example that we had before, here's what this looks like for the fictional liberal arts college that I just showed you. You'll see that real actionable strategies are now emerging from the analysis. And these are just a few examples. This is not an exhaustive list of strategies that could emerge here. So on the SO side, this college might choose to create B2B relationships with corporations, with local employers based on faculty networks. So combining faculty expertise, which is an internal strength, with the demand for like the expertise that the faculty are offering in local businesses, which is external. They might also choose to host events for local employers to create more internship placements. Again, they're leveraging the highly engaged student body. Students are interested in internships and are placing them into the external businesses that need that expertise and the strengths that liberal arts graduates bring. They might also choose to hold a student challenge to create new alternative credentials to test, knowing they have really strong extracurriculars and the market needs those alternative credentials. They might choose to do that. On the ST side, strengths and threats, they might choose to create a differentiated brand around the student experience. So knowing the student experience is a strength and that they need to be more differentiated because there's so much competition, they might invest in that way and really make themselves stand out. They might choose to create an out-of-state and out-of-region pipeline of students through highly specialized and market-centered programs that align with top faculty expertise. So they're taking that threat of the demographic cliff, especially potentially if they're in a state that's being hit with it especially hard, and they're saying, we have these strengths in our faculty, we're going to create a pipeline that specifically aligns with the specialized strengths that only our faculty offer. On the WO side, they might create stackable badges and certificates to reach more price-sensitive audiences. So as you might recall, a weakness was that they have high tuition that makes it hard for them to reach everyone they want to reach. Well, now they're leveraging the opportunity in the market that there is a demand for stackable badges, and they're reaching those audiences that are out of reach right now. They might develop a B2B tuition remission pipeline with local employers, knowing that local employers want their graduates, but the graduates can't, or the students can't always afford it. they're now solving for that issue with B2B partnerships. And then finally on WT, weaknesses and threats, which is the daunting space, but there's a lot that can be done in this space as well. They might choose to partner with edtech platforms to increase their brand awareness. They might get on Coursera, on edX, on Udemy, and on LinkedIn Learning, and all of those different platforms to invest in brand awareness and get their faculty expertise and thought leadership out there. And this is a little bit on the darker side. They may eliminate some staff load to resolve that administrative silo issue and increase cross-functional collaboration as a result of just the threats that are happening in the market as well. So hopefully that showed you what you can all do with a SWOT analysis and how powerful of a tool that is. Next, we're going to go into analyzing your competitors. This is a really important one that is in some ways super obvious, but I'm always also astounded by how many institutions don't really do this on an ongoing basis. And when asked about their competitors, often they think of competitors sort of as every single institution that exists in the United States, which in case you don't know, it's 4,500. They're not all your competitors, right? Your competitors are the 5 to 7 schools that you're consistently losing students to. And so a first step would be to get like really clear on who are those schools. And sometimes that's going to differ for undergrad versus grad. And sometimes it's going to differ on a program or major basis, but getting really clear on that is a first step. And you need to understand, right? What are they doing? How are they doing it? And what gaps they're all leaving, so that you can understand how your institution could fill those gaps in a way that really aligns with what the market and what students are looking for. So just very concretely, let's assume maybe you're a university that really is trying to focus on graduate programs in business. You're establishing your 5 to 7 competitors, and you start looking at what you can find about them publicly. So on the marketing side, here's an example. You would look at their web pages, their landing pages, their paid media copy, their ad creative, what presence they have in the market. You would potentially do some secret shopping on their nurture streams. And then you can figure out what are they all saying and what's there that they're not saying that you could say that is differentiating and aligned with the market. But you don't have to leave it just at their marketing assets. You could also look at their IPEDS data, their job placements, what students are saying about them on Reddit. A ton of different publicly available data is there, and you can present that to your leadership and make a case for how you think you can differentiate your brand and your programs. Maybe there's a program that none of them are offering that has a lot of demand in the market. Is there a case you can make that program be explored and offered at your institution? So the takeaway is really by evaluating your competitors across these different platforms and channels, you can understand what's working for others, and you can identify gaps in your own strategy that you can use to fill in a crowded market.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room for a minute. And since keeping an elephant in a room is actually pretty cruel, we'll just use this adorable image instead. But on many campuses, there is a shared delusion that really all programs and departments are equal, and that they all deserve the same level of resources and attention. Now, this hasn't been the operating reality for a very long time, but it still persists as a bit of a delusion. So now, really for higher education, this is the time, as uncomfortable as it is, to really dig in and challenge that assumption. Indeed, now is really the time to make some of the hard, kind of clear-eyed decisions and not let this crisis go to waste. There is a direct positive correlation between institutions cutting programs and enrollment growth, as counterintuitive as that sounds. Letting go of some and adding a few strategic picks and being able to make some better strategic investments really is the key to growth. We could do a whole webinar on this, but let's look at some broad criteria to help guide those decisions. Are programs aligned with solid market demand data? Do you have a particularly strong program in a given discipline, even if it's not necessarily a high growth one? Do you have programs that are really aligning with your core mission and so forth? These are all pretty solid reasons to keep programs and perhaps to consider investing more in them. Conversely, are programs just being kept alive because they already exist, because you've kind of always had this program? If the demand isn't there, these just aren't valid reasons anymore for kind of keeping programs around, as painful and hard as those discussions are. One other factor when it comes to starting new programs, be careful about chasing hot programs. Just a few years ago, for example, data analytics, user experience, product management, these were white hot career fields. And we saw a lot of schools jumping on them and launching programs in these fields. Now, as job demand is cooling, we can expect that degree demand may end up doing the same. So getting the data right here and making some smart predictions is really quite vital. Let me just give you kind of a quick example of this. This is Luther College. If you haven't heard of them, they are a tiny tuition-dependent, religiously affiliated liberal arts college in rural Iowa. So not really kind of fitting the criteria that we would typically see for high growth institutions. But just a few years ago, they made some very tough decisions about their academic portfolio. They also made some very smart data-driven decisions about adding programs, such as engineering science, which doesn't require ABET accreditation, provides a viable path to an engineering career to students who, maybe don't do well at traditional engineering institutions. And it could be taught by faculty in some of the programs that they decided to sunset. The result of all these strategic decisions has been real growth at just the right time for them at Luther.
All right, number 4. Oh, the joys of launching something new in the dreaded KPI conversation, right? That we all have to have at some point. So sometimes this isn't fun, but I think that we can make it a little bit fun. Documenting KPIs and checking in on them have made it possible for our team to have insightful conversations about what we should do next on a campaign and why, and then think about how to communicate that to everybody that's on the project. So what we always do is we start by understanding what are our campaign specific metrics and versus our comprehensive funnel metrics for any project that we're doing. And examples of those you can see here. And then when we get into a project, we can document the very specific metrics that we want to strive for. And I found that starting small and talking about the metrics at a granular or at a higher level and then going into a granular level can help a team do something new. So let's say on your next project that you decide that you want to focus in on the number of leads and the cost per lead as your KPIs. You can then determine the number of leads that you want for a campaign and what CPL you want to produce them at. You can monitor them weekly, and then we can have a milestone check-in point to see how we're doing against mapping towards those KPIs, and that gives you the opportunity to make some changes. Connected to that, in certain ways is number 5, right? So the people who have participated in your program in the last 5 years, they hold the key to unlock your next audience breakthrough, to hit those goals in those KPIs. And that's where we want to talk about the 80-20 rule. This is all about looking at your data and having it show you where your biggest brand awareness pockets are, and then those small glimmers of hope of where the little pockets of new markets exist. So you can put 80% of your focus on those markets who already know you and who've already enrolled, and 20% reserved for testing new audiences. Recently, our team did this for a school in the Northeast that wanted to increase their number of domestic applications year over year. So what we did was we reviewed their data. We noticed a big opportunity in targeting domestic audiences on LinkedIn through conversation ads in a new way that they haven't approached them before. We were able to generate highly qualified leads, and that helped us bring that domestic number of applications up by 7% year over year. Now, there's still a lot of opportunity for us in this space, but it was great to be able to see this progress and play out this tip in action. And so here's another example of the way that the 80-20 rule can work in practice. So what you can see here is that lead generation is going to take the bulk of the budget, and that's also going to be where we're going to really focus on those people who we already know a lot about us, and are going to want to come into our program. And then we're going to leverage awareness and retargeting with slightly smaller budgets to test those new markets of people perhaps on a new platform or even in a new geography. And we'll do that really thoughtfully and also with being really smart about the budget. And what can happen after those tests are done is that you can look at your lead generation budget or other places where you have budget, and you can even allocate more money to those tests that have performed well for you.
Dana, you're on mute. Of course, we had to have one moment in the webinar.
One person had to do it. Exactly. And, some things just never change with me. I gotta tell you. So All right. So one thing to kind of keep in mind is that you really can't be all things to all people. Marketing and student acquisition costs are just climbing higher and higher. Resources are super thin. So you need to be able to focus on your very best shot when it comes to targeting potential learners. Those kind of spray and pray tactics, they're really kind of done. Like your peer at Radford said, there really are no more names to buy from some of those older tactics. It is time to really get much more focused. So kind of here are three things to consider. The first is geographies or geos. This is where we kind of know where you can win. You need to know exactly which zip codes, counties, and regions can deliver the highest return on investment for you right now. Where are your highest converting students coming from? Which regions are saturated with competitors, and where do you maybe have some blue sky to grow? The answers to these questions exist right now in your own data and in really easily available public data sources. And again, don't stop at just historical performance either. Many schools are targeting geos because, that's just what they've always done and it seems to be working for them. Sometimes those choices really don't hold up to scrutiny. By layering in some factors like population trends, graduation rates, labor market trends, household income, and so forth, you can really start to see where opportunity might be growing and where it might be shrinking. And this is a great time to challenge those assumptions for sure. Next up with our targeting, we have demographics. Let's make sure we are segmenting intelligently. Not all 17-year-olds are the same. Neither are all adult learners. Let's be strategic about age, income level, race and ethnicity, parental education level, whatever variables matter most to your institution's mission and goals. Now let's go ahead and use this data, not just to target the right people on the right channels, but to also tailor your message. If you're trying to reach working adults, for example, obviously campus life isn't going to really resonate, but flexibility, return on investment, career advancement, and so forth, that will land. And that kind of brings us to our next point, which is psychographics, adjusting your message to your prospect's mindset. Thinking about that mindset, it really is the secret sauce of being able to break through and achieve some outstanding results. You need to be able to understand your audience's motivations, their concerns, and their aspirations. What do they value? What's holding them back? What are they looking for in terms of belonging, prestige, security, impact? These kind of basic human emotions. So really understanding how to adjust that into your messaging is key. Kind of circling back to the Radford example for a moment, this is a big part of what they were able to accomplish. As I mentioned earlier, they realized that their students were really heavily trending first-generation college students, a lot of folks from rural areas and so forth. And they knew that they were concerned about debt, value, getting a good job and so forth, and really getting hammered by inflation trends that we've had over the past few years. So that Radford promise of not raising tuition, it spoke loud and clear to the majority of their best fit students, and it really resonated with them throughout. So really important time to get our geos right.
Indeed. And before I go into number 7, differentiate your brand, just a reminder that if you have questions or comments, to drop them into the QA function so we can answer your questions afterwards. We got one question submitted by someone also who can't attend, so we'll for sure answer that, but would love to hear what other questions you have. So without further ado, number 7, differentiate your brand. Did you know that 98% of colleges and universities look alike to students? It's time to change that narrative. In a sea of nearly identical institutions and a sea of sameness, standing out can feel impossible, but it is essential. So one of the key principles we really like to talk about when it comes to differentiation, similar to my point about you don't have to differentiate from 4,500 schools, you really only have to differentiate from your top 5 to 7 competitors. Here the point is, not every value proposition or message that you put out there needs to be super unique and differentiated. You do need to say, to some extent, what everyone is saying because it reflects what students want. Most students for a small liberal arts college, to stick with that example, are looking for a small student to faculty ratio. They're looking for state-of-the-art facilities. They're looking for excellent outcomes and career placement statistics, and so forth. But there needs to be one thing that makes your university unique, one thing that hooks them, and that ties into what Dana was just talking about with psychographics, and we like to talk about this in terms of a psychographic hook, something that is a hook that really ties into a prospect's aspirations and fears, something that's really almost like on a primal level, going to activate them towards your brand. So the principle here is balance the unique with the universal. And Take Purdue Global, for example. It's one of our favorite brands. Their success lies in that human-centric marketing. It highlights their distinct offerings while addressing the universal desire for really, flexible, career-focused education. And they leverage storytelling, authentic visuals, and psychographic targeting to create meaningful connections with prospective students. So what they're pitching, which is flexibility, career outcomes, the ability to study from wherever, career-focused education, none of that is unique. But the way that they're doing it, through their authentic storytelling and through the emotion on the faces of these photos that you see, is differentiating. So differentiation doesn't have to be overly complicated. You can differentiate your brand by choosing one key differentiator and matching it with a bunch of universal value propositions that you know your students are looking for across competitors. You can then weave that differentiation into human-centric creative. You can create strong psychographic hooks around it. You can use authentic photography and video. And from there, you need to target the right audiences, the way that Dana explained, geographic, psychographic, and demographic. And you have to then package those into content-first campaigns, which are campaigns that are not transactional, but that have an emotional dimension and that are engaging throughout the funnel. Kate.
Number 8 is to build cross-functional teams. So it's an excellent idea to build cross-functional teams because these reduce redundancy, increase efficiency, enhance your ability to implement those brand differentiation strategies. However, this takes time, and a total reorganization is unrealistic right now, and you want to act now. Happily, it is possible to reap these benefits on a shorter time scale by choosing one goal-oriented, measurable project for teams to work on together. At Viv, we see great potential for marketing, enrollment, and advancement teams to work together. So to begin to build a cross-functional team, you bring these groups together to work on that one well-defined, measurable joint project. For example, in 2014, Miami University aligned Annual Giving Day with Student Move-In Day in a well-branded campaign with clear donor goals called #MoveInMiami. This event bridges an on-campus student event with alumni donor interest. The campaign includes a Facebook Live page to see what is happening on campus to increase excitement, as well as opportunities for donors to give to specific student groups. By only their third year, they exceeded $1 million in donations. It's now a successful and beloved tradition. Enrollment now touts the excitement of Move-In Day, and advancement uses the day for giving, all united in one marketing campaign. Even if your teams only work together on one project this year, it will be building the foundation for more cross-functional work and create momentum for future success.
At Viv, as Kate just described, I think in that example, we see, really great opportunity in testing something. And if it works out, that's awesome. And if it doesn't, and our idea maybe wasn't the best one, then it's time to pivot. Because we know that not every idea is going to pan out. But what if we don't try something and we miss the one that's going to work? So it's really key to have feedback loops and check-ins that allow for time to say, hey, this was cool, guys, but I think we've got to pivot it because we have to do something else. Approaching all of our work with an entrepreneurial mindset helps center the idea that we absolutely will fail, but those learnings from those failings will pay dividends as we move forward. So let's take an example of something that we worked on last year. We worked with a small liberal arts college in New England. And as we all may remember, the FAFSA application was a bit of a mess last year and was a real concern for many enrollment offices. After this school tried a few different ways to get the people in their pipeline to finish the FAFSA, we decided to upload lists of those who had been accepted, but they had not deposited to YouTube, and we served them transformation story ads that talked about how the students' lives would have been different if they hadn't completed the FAFSA and finished applying to this school. While the data wasn't perfect, the institution was able to attribute this campaign to helping lift the numbers of completed FAFSA applications, and that helped them exceed their enrollment goal for undergraduates last year.
Number 10 is invest in people. Faculty and staff are your primary brand ambassadors and morale leaders. If they aren't doing well, the campus suffers. If they are anxious, stressed, gloomy, then this seeps into the whole campus. But if they are hopeful, optimistic, energized, then this energy is contagious and can be used to steer and handle change. They are resources that, when empowered, can set the tone for a positive next chapter. So you need to invest in hearing them out. When university leadership is contemplating big changes, studies show that campuses handle change and restructuring well when faculty are consulted in the process. You can read about this in Patricia Gumpert's book, Academic Fault Lines. Gumpert's research reveals, quote, when academic programs and positions are eliminated in academic restructuring, the results are more readily accepted if the process involves faculty consultation, end quote. This can be done by taking the time to listen to a faculty and agreeing on decision-making criteria, some of the kinds of criteria that we've talked about throughout this. Even if the decisions are hard and not everything the faculty wanted, they will be more readily able to accept it if they were consulted. But if they're not consulted, Gumpert explains that organizational morale is greatly damaged. But if you harness faculty energy and hear them out, they can even point you to the change. For example, when Hampshire College was in dire financial straits, their new direction actually came from faculty vision. The faculty put forward what they thought was the best way forward. Audra will tell you more about what happened at Hampshire College.
So as Kate said, and what some of us may recall from 2019 is that Hampshire College was dealing with financial constraints and a lack of differentiation. And at that time, they were watching other small liberal arts colleges in New England and around the country close. And so in partnership between the leadership in the cabinet level and the faculty, they made the decision to make a very large and decisive pivot to remove majors and departments and to instead focus on having an open curriculum, which is just a massive change that had a lot of other granular changes that had to happen as a result. While they did this on the enrollment and academic side, they also were restructuring the ways they were working to secure money for the institution's future. And so with all of these pivots that I just mentioned and the ones that didn't necessarily make the news stories, they were able to help improve their enrollment numbers and get closer and closer to financial viability. And so decision making and strategy and coordination like this, and like what we've talked about today, is not easy. But when it's done together as a team, there can be a really big payoff for the school, but also for the dreams and goals of the students that the school holds. And so what this meant for Hampshire is that they were able to watch their enrollment rebound. And as of 2024, they communicated that they were on their way to financial viability.
Amazing. So hopefully before we go into QA, you'll start typing your questions or formulating your questions. Really excited to see them and discuss with you. Before we do that, just a really quick pitch. We're excited to introduce a suite of half-day online workshops that are designed to help both executive and marketing and enrollment teams really refine their strategies and enhance their efforts. For these workshops, our team will audit all relevant materials, come prepared with feedback and a facilitation approach that results in a concrete roadmap for your team to achieve the desired progress in the area that we're addressing at the workshop. Audra is going to paste the link to our webpage about this in the chat as well. I'll quickly go over those topics, but note we can also create custom workshops based on your needs, and each of these workshops is open to up to 12 people as well. So for executive teams, our workshops include building an entrepreneurial campus, where we'll discuss a focus on fostering an innovation-driven culture at your institution, creating market-aligned program portfolios, including aligning academic offerings with market demand to ensure relevance and growth. That's super top of mind right now for many institutions. And then integrating mission, brand, and culture, how to weave your institution's mission into all aspects of branding and culture for a cohesive, powerful message. And then for the marketing and enrollment teams, we offer overhauling your approach to lead and applicant nurture, going over techniques to better nurture leads at every stage of the funnel. So you don't have to pour quite as much money into the top of the funnel because you're optimizing the bottom of the funnel. Human-centered storytelling across the enrollment funnel, so really creating compelling, authentic stories that resonate with your prospective students, and optimizing enrollment through data-driven digital advertising, using data to refine digital ad strategies and optimize lead generation. So if any of these workshops sound like something your team would benefit from, reach out through the webpage that Audra just pasted or by emailing us directly, and we'll share more details in the chat, like I said. Awesome. So with that, we would love to hear your questions. Reminder to please post them into the Q&A function, and we'll read them and mark them complete there once we answer them. A first question that was submitted to us prior to the session is how a marketing and enrollment team can navigate uncertainty about budget in the upcoming fiscal year, which is also the very fiscal year that coincides with the demographic cliff. When strategic investment in marketing and enrollment is more important than ever. So this person is wondering, normally they would be going through budget season right now, and they would have a pretty clear picture of what their budget is going to be in FY26 by May at the latest. But this year it seems, because they're at a larger institution that's really vulnerable to federal funding cuts, it seems like the uncertainty is a little bit higher around what the budget is going to be, and they're doubting that they're going to know as early as they normally would. And Audra and team, I'm going to be really curious to hear what you think about this. To me, I think this is where scenario planning can come in really helpfully, and forecasting. So possibly maybe creating 3 budget scenarios proactively without necessarily having gotten final word from the CFO or whoever on the leadership team would be letting you know that, and really modeling out, like we did with the slide that Audra showed with the 3 options. So modeling out, with this amount of investment, here's how we would allocate the money, and if we got this much money, here's how we would spend it, and then modeling out from there how many applicants and enrollments we think that's going to result in, and how it's going to impact KPIs around brand awareness and engagement and retention and all of those KPIs, and showing them these 3 distinct scenarios proactively with a strategic set of recommendations to accompany them could be a really powerful way to also elevate your leadership voice at a time when they're probably very much in need of that kind of thinking and modeling. But Audra and others, what do you think?
The other thing that I would add to that type of scenario and presentation is that within each of those versions, there's the opportunity to communicate, if we get this, this is what we'll do on all the other parts of our work together that don't just touch paid media or budget related things like that, right? Like, so if we can only do tier 1, then we're going to amp up what we do on grassroots outreach, and we're going to try to align people to call people more, things like that, right? So you can be thinking in an integrated fashion, totally through the funnel and across the entire enrollment cycle, so that you can make the most out of what you are able to get in terms of resources, and make the most out of your time too, because we know how precious everyone's time is on an internal team.
Absolutely.
So any questions, if you have them, now would be the time to drop them into the Q&A function. And just to reiterate too, this was recorded. We will send everyone who registered the recording. We also have a simple one-pager PDF with the 10 things that we went over, some helpful links for you, and sort of like an elevator pitch description of each thing. So if you need a morale boost, put that on your office wall, keep it on your desk, share it with your colleagues. I know we can all use a boost right now, and at the end of the day, the work that we're all doing in higher ed is very worthwhile and will have an impact even in uncertain times. I did just get a question here in the Q&A function that says, if you could hire a web developer or a content analyst for the next budget cycle, which would you prioritize and why? How interesting. I love that very either or oriented question.
This does not feel like a hypothetical either.
Yeah, Dana, do you wanna weigh in there, or who wants to answer that one? I guess it would, we could give like a wishy-washy answer, like it depends on your priorities and your KPI and framework and your resourcing, but
I will jump in on this one
yeah,
just to say that while it is hard to find good people who can do both those things, it's probably a little bit easier to find someone who can help you on the web development side. It's better if they have higher ed experience and so forth, but finding somebody who can really nail content is difficult. I would maybe tack more towards on the content side, but of course we're a content first agency, so maybe I'm a little biased. But also just from a resourcing standpoint, like I said, I think it would be easier to find, not easy, but easier to find somebody who could help you on that development side than it would be to figure out content beyond. So that's my take.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I lean towards the content person too, because if you're able to align with your content person and with your design person and have a look at all of your messaging and take the time to refresh your top level messaging and think about how that translates to visuals, well, then what you can do is you can take that and you can think about how does the site, how does our social media content, how does our paid media content have to change? And for the website and for landing pages, that's where a web developer can be really effective, and where they can partner together to do that work. So I agree. I think you could go either or, but that's what came to mind for me.
Yeah, you want to nail your content strategy before you make the changes on the web is really the simple answer, like, which is maybe a little bit of a cop-out because we're saying you need both. You just need the content analyst first.
Yeah, right. So like this one, maybe for the next one, you could get the web person.
Yeah, love it. That was very concrete. Let's give it a minute or two to see if any other questions emerge here. Otherwise, we know it is a busy time of year. It's the middle of the week. All of you have plenty of things that could keep you occupied. So we really appreciate you being here today and spending an hour with us. Definitely feel free to share this recording also with colleagues who are looking for clarity and new approaches and some case studies and examples. I think we gave a lot of those as well, which, I always say there isn't a central place to go to in higher ed for case studies and figuring out what works for institutions and what we can borrow and emulate. And I think we try to provide that as best as we can in these conversations. So I'm not seeing any further questions. So thank you all very, very much for being here again, and have a great day. Bye.